Right now, something no scientist fully predicted is unfolding at the Dead Sea. Divers working near the southern basin have pulled a perfectly sealed clay vessel from the lakebed, its interior completely dry despite centuries underwater. At the same time, engineers monitoring the shoreline have detected the water level rising for the first time in decades, reversing a trend that had been accelerating for nearly a century. And above the water, witnesses describe a low, sustained hum rising from beneath the surface, not from machinery, not from wind, but from the lake itself. Each of these events has a possible explanation. Together, they are becoming impossible to ignore. If this message speaks to you, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below, and share your thoughts, because more people around the world are beginning to ask the same question. The Dead Sea sits at the lowest point on Earth, nearly 430 meters below sea level, a place so saturated with salt that nothing living was ever supposed to survive in it. For decades, its shoreline shrank at a rate of more than a meter per year, exposing cracked white flats and abandoned resort structures swallowed by the retreating edge. Environmental scientists, regional governments, and international organizations all agreed on the trajectory. The lake was dying. Then the measurements changed. In recent months, monitoring stations along the northern basin began recording something that contradicted every projection. The water level, which had been declining consistently since the 1970s, showed a reversal. Not dramatic, not sudden, but real and sustained. The numbers were verified. The trend was unmistakable. A body of water that was not supposed to recover was, in measurable terms, filling again. From a hydrological standpoint, there are possible explanations. Unusual rainfall patterns in the Jordan River catchment area, reduced agricultural diversion from upstream tributaries, and shifting groundwater pressure can all affect inflow. These are legitimate, observable factors. But what made researchers pause was not the reversal alone. It was when it began and what was happening at the same moment along the lakebed. Because in the book of Ezekiel 47, a vision was recorded of water flowing from the temple eastward, growing deeper and wider until it reached the sea. And when it reached the sea, the lifeless waters, the text says, were healed. The fish became very numerous. The language is symbolic but also spatial. It describes a future moment when the Dead Sea, specifically, becomes the location of restoration. Not destruction. Not warning. Healing. So when this body of water, long used as a symbol of spiritual desolation, begins to reverse its course in a season already marked by unusual signs across the region, people do not simply observe it as a data point. They feel it as a shift. A body of water that represented endings is behaving, faintly but measurably, like a beginning. It was during routine survey work near the southern basin that the discovery surfaced. A research team lowering equipment along the lakebed detected an anomalous density reading at moderate depth. When divers descended, they found it wedged between two limestone formations, upright, intact, sealed. A clay vessel approximately 40 centimeters in height, its opening covered with what appeared to be fired clay and a dark organic sealant that had not dissolved despite centuries of submersion in one of the most chemically hostile bodies of water on Earth. The outside of the vessel bore traces of mineral deposits consistent with long-term exposure to high salinity brine, confirming it had rested there for an extended period. But the interior was completely dry. No brine had penetrated. No sediment had entered. Whatever had been placed inside was preserved in a sealed environment within a lake that corrodes nearly everything it touches. Preliminary analysis of the organic sealant suggests a composition consistent with materials used in the early Iron Age, placing its origin somewhere between 1700 BCE, a period tied closely to the prophetic era in ancient Israel. From a scientific perspective, this is extraordinary but not impossible. Fired clay sealed with certain resins can resist penetration for long periods under specific conditions, and the low oxygen environment of the deepest lake bed slows degradation significantly. But the question people cannot set aside is not how it survived. It is what it means that it survived here, in this water, sealed, intact, and surfacing now. Because in Scripture, sealed vessels are rarely incidental. They are instruments of preservation, objects removed from ordinary time and hidden until a specific moment. The prophet Jeremiah, writing in the same era suggested by the vessel's composition, was instructed to place legal documents in a clay jar so they would last for a long time, as a sign that houses and fields and vineyards would again be bought in the land. A sealed vessel in that tradition is not a relic. It is a promise. And that is why this discovery, emerging from the floor of a lake that represents desolation, rising into the open air in a season of unusual reversals, carries a weight that chemical analysis alone cannot fully account for. Is this simply a well-preserved artifact recovered by chance? Or something placed with intention, waiting for a moment when the conditions around it began to change? And just when attention settled on what was rising from the water, it shifted again, this time to what was coming from beneath it. Along sections of the Dead Sea shoreline, both residents and researchers have reported a sound that does not belong to wind, machinery, boat traffic, or any identified natural process. It is low, sustained, and rhythmic, emanating not from the surface but from somewhere deeper, as if the lakebed itself were producing a vibration. Those who heard it describe a similar sensation, a pressure felt more in the chest than in the ears, a tone that seemed to bypass hearing and settle directly into the body. Some initially assumed it was construction work from a distance. Others considered seismic activity, which does occur in the region due to the Dead Sea transform fault system that runs beneath the valley. But seismic monitoring stations recorded no corresponding tremors at the times the sound was reported. The fault was not moving. The sound had no identified tectonic source. From a geological perspective, cavitation effects, gas release from subsurface layers, and resonance within underwater limestone formations can produce low-frequency sounds under specific conditions. These explanations are technically plausible. But they do not fully account for the consistency of what witnesses described, or for the timing. Because this sound became noticeable in the same weeks that the water level began reversing and the sealed vessel was recovered. Not before. Not independently. Simultaneously. In the book of Joel 2 verse 30, it is written, "I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth." The verse does not specify what those wonders look like. It does not describe them as violent or obvious. It names them as wonders, which implies the unusual, the unexpected, the kind of event that pauses ordinary rhythm and demands attention. A lake reversing its decline, a sealed vessel from the prophetic era rising undamaged from its floor, and a sound with no clear source rising from beneath the water. Individually, each has a possible explanation. Together, they suggest a pattern forming in a location already dense with meaning. And a question that becomes harder each day to answer simply. Are we watching nature operate in unusual ways? Or is something being prepared in a place the prophets already named? Before we continue, if this message is resonating with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Your voice may reach someone who needs to hear this right now. The Dead Sea is not introduced casually in Scripture. It sits at the end of a valley mentioned in the earliest chapters of Genesis, near the cities that became symbols of judgment. Its waters appear in the background of some of the most consequential moments in the Hebrew Bible, silent, still, and present. But what Scripture does most powerfully with the Dead Sea is not look backward. It looks forward. The vision in Ezekiel 47 is one of the most geographically specific prophecies in the entire text. It describes a stream flowing eastward from Jerusalem, growing progressively deeper, too deep to cross on foot, eventually reaching the sea. And the result is not a flood and not a storm. The result is life. Swarms of living creatures wherever the river goes. Large numbers of fish. Fruit trees bearing every month on its banks. A sea that was dead, healed. This is the only location in Scripture assigned a specific future of restoration rather than judgment. The Dead Sea is not abandoned in the prophetic vision. It is transformed. That distinction matters when we stand in a season where this same body of water is behaving differently than it has in living memory. The reversal is still small. The vessel is still being studied. The sound has not been explained. None of this constitutes fulfillment. Prophecy is not confirmed by a single news cycle. But what these events do is exactly what unusual signs have always done throughout Scripture. They create attention. They slow people down. They interrupt the assumption that things will continue as they always have. Because in Scripture, restoration does not begin with a completed picture. It begins with the first sign that the direction has changed. And in a place named by a prophet 2,500 years ago as the destination of healing waters, the direction has, in measurable terms, changed. The question is not whether this is the fulfillment of Ezekiel's vision. The question is whether we are paying attention to the moment we are living in. Because if the Dead Sea can reverse course, so can a life that feels like it has passed beyond recovery. If a vessel sealed for millennia can surface intact, the promises you were given and have not yet seen fulfilled are not lost. They are preserved. And if a sound is rising from depths that instruments cannot fully explain, perhaps creation itself is already responding to something the human eye has not yet been allowed to see. This is not the time for panic. It is not the time to calculate dates or construct timelines. It is the time to be awake, to be aware, and to hold with renewed seriousness the simple and ancient instruction. Watch. Be ready. Because what was promised was never cancelled. It was sealed, like a clay vessel in deep water, waiting for the appointed moment to surface.